When I was 8 years old, I lost my parents in a car accident. It was a rainy night and we were driving home. I was in the back seat, dozing off to the hum of the engine. My dad was behind the wheel and my mom was sitting beside him. In the past, my mom had always told him to get his eyes checked, worried about his vision, but he would just laugh it off, insisting that his eyesight was perfect. That night, however, the rain was pouring heavily, making it hard to see the road clearly. My dad never noticed the stop sign up ahead until it was too late. He tried to swerve, but the car skidded on the wet road and slammed into a tree. I remember the sound of screeching tires, the crash, and the jolt that threw me against my seatbelt. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed. The room was bright and I felt disoriented and groggy, probably from the pain medication. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I saw my grandfather sitting in a chair next to my bed. He looked tired and worried, lines of concern etched on his face. I tried to call out to him, but my voice was weak. When he noticed I was awake, he quickly stood up and came to my side, gently holding my cheeks with his hands. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. I could see the worry in his eyes and it made my heart ache. First thing I asked about was my parents. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. His face fell and tears welled up in his eyes. A knot formed in my stomach and I kept asking, "Where are they? Are they okay? I want to see them." My mind raced with worry and fear. I remember thinking to myself that once we got back home from the hospital, I would literally force my dad to get his eyes checked this time. My grandfather took a deep breath, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he said. "Your dad didn't make it. He passed away in the accident." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt a wave of pain and disbelief wash over me. I couldn't understand how my dad could be gone just like that. I cried out, "What about Mom? Is she okay?" My grandfather nodded, though his eyes were still filled with sorrow. "She's in hospital, but she's alive. She's going to be okay." The tears started to flow and my grandfather held me as I cried, my heart breaking for the dad I had lost and for my mom, who was still fighting to recover. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits and overwhelming grief. My mom wasn't ready to accept the fact that my dad was really gone. They had been high school sweethearts together for years, each other's best friends and first love. I had never seen my parents fight. Instead, I grew up watching them be affectionate and completely devoted to one another. My dad was truly my mom's soulmate, and losing him must have been unbearable for her. Her grief consumed her to the point where she stopped taking care of herself and me. She would drink all day and then cry herself to sleep at night. Luckily, my grandpa moved in with us for those few months to help take care of us. On several occasions, I caught Grandpa trying to make my mom vomit because she had accidentally taken rat poison in an attempt to end her life or stop her from locking herself in the washroom for too long as he was scared about what she might do there alone. I'm sure she didn't truly want to die, but maybe her pain at the time was so immense that she couldn't see any other way out. It was heartbreaking to witness my mom in such a state. Her overwhelming grief and despair left little room for me to process my own pain. I was more worried about her well-being than my own. Watching her in such pain was incredibly difficult, and I couldn't fully understand or express my own feelings. Things came to a head one afternoon when my mother drank too much and slipped, falling down the stairs. She started to bleed from a cut on her forehead, and was unable to get up because she had broken one of her legs. Unfortunately, my grandpa had gone grocery shopping and I was at school. Hours later, when Grandpa found her unconscious, he immediately called 911. She was taken to the hospital where they treated her for injuries. When Grandma came to pick me up to go to the hospital and inform me about Mom, I was terrified that I might lose another parent. It was a horrifying thought. Luckily, my mother's wounds were not serious and the doctors were able to treat her. When I saw her in the hospital room, I broke down and couldn't hold back my tears anymore. I cried and asked her why she didn't want to be alive, telling her how I couldn't bear to lose her like we had lost Dad. My mother looked at me helplessly, and I think that was the first time she started to realize just how much I had been trying to be strong for her all this time. She hugged me tightly and assured me that she was going to be okay. After that terrifying incident, I noticed a shift in my mom's behavior. When she returned home from the hospital, her first act was to remove all the alcohol bottles from our house. It was perhaps a symbolic gesture for her, a step towards breaking free from her grief. She started waking up early with me, a routine we hadn't followed in a long time. By this time, I had grown accustomed to getting ready for school on my own, but having her by my side again felt comforting. Despite the weight of her own struggles, she slowly made an effort to be there for me, to ease my burden in any way she could. As days passed, she began cooking meals again, something she had always enjoyed doing before the tragedy struck. The sound of her humming while preparing dinner brought back memories of happier times, filling our home with a sense of warmth and normalcy. In the evenings, she would sit on the porch just like she used to with my dad. I started joining her so she wouldn't miss Dad a lot, and we would listen to music together, lost in our thoughts, yet finding solace in each other's company. When the first-year anniversary of my dad's passing approached, I noticed a change in the way my mother's friends and relatives interacted with her. They wanted my mom to stop feeling sorry for herself and encouraged her to get out there and start dating again. Up until then, my grandfather had been providing financial support for us. My dad had also left behind a substantial life insurance policy, and our house was fully paid for, which helped us get by. However, with ongoing expenses and my school fees, we needed a more stable income coming in every month. My mother, who had been a stay-at-home mom her whole life up until then, began searching for a job. However, the options she found offered very low pay and weren't sufficient to cover all our expenses. It became clear to her that finding a partner who could contribute financially to our household was necessary. And that's when she finally decided to start going out on dates. Months later, I got to meet my mom's boyfriend, Van, who would eventually go on to become my stepdad. Van seemed like a genuinely nice person. He was always gentle and polite around my mom, showing her the kind of respect and care she deserved. He even made an effort to bond with me separately by taking me to a few baseball games. Watching the matches live with him was thrilling, and those moments we shared helped me start feeling more comfortable around him. My mom was careful throughout this time, always checking in with me to make sure I was okay with everything and that I felt comfortable with the changes happening in our lives. Slowly, as time passed, spending time with Van began to feel normal, and I started to let my guard down. When Van eventually proposed to my mom and she said yes, I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy for her, truly, because she had found someone who could be there for her. But I also mourned for my dad, as I had always thought my parents would be happily together forever. Their wedding day was a special occasion. My grandfather walked my mom down the aisle, a moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. He seemed genuinely happy for her, and his support made everything feel a bit more right. After their wedding, we eventually moved into Van's place. It was a big change for us, but my mom made sure to make it as smooth as possible for me. Shortly after the move, my mom decided to sell our house. She explained to me that the money from the sale would be put away for my college fund. It was a bittersweet moment because our old house held so many memories of my dad and our life before the accident. But I understood that this was part of moving forward, and I appreciated my mom's effort to secure my future. Adapting to life with Van was a process, but my mom and I did our best. My mom seemed more relaxed and happier after her marriage with Van, which made me feel at ease. She started to smile more, and there was a lightness in her that I hadn't seen since after the accident. Seeing her happier made me feel hopeful for our future. At first, it was just the three of us, me, Van, my mom. We would spend a lot of time together, like driving to the beach on Sundays or going out for ice cream whenever we felt like it. Sometimes we'd even have movie nights at home with popcorn and blankets spread out on the living room floor. Van and I would practice playing baseball. Every now and then, whenever he had the time, we made it a point to visit my grandfather every 2 weeks to make sure he was doing well. My marks started to improve at school, and I even began taking part in sports competitions. My teachers noticed the change and often praised my progress. It felt like we were finally finding our rhythm again. We were happy in our own little bubble, enjoying the simple moments and creating new memories. Van was genuinely trying to be a good stepdad, and I appreciated his efforts. He would help me with my homework and teach me how to fix things around the house. He taught me things that I'm sure my dad would have had he been here. Months later, my mother informed me that she was pregnant. She seemed ecstatic about the news as she told me. I was genuinely happy for her, and she shared how excited she was for me to have a younger sibling. Over the months, we found out that she was going to have a daughter. I was thrilled at the thought of having a baby sister. When my mother finally went into labor and Catherine was born, I couldn't believe how tiny she was. She looked like a delicate little doll with her tiny feet and fingers. Even the way she yawned was adorable. I fell in love with her from the first moment I saw her. My mom and Van were over the moon too. They took turns taking care of her every night, and even though she was a tiny baby, she brought so much life and energy into our home. I would sit by her crib for hours after school just watching her sleep, fascinated by her innocence and beauty. Our little family was growing, and with Catherine's arrival, it felt more complete. However, as Catherine grew up, something strange began happening. I started to notice that Van became very possessive of Catherine and did not like me spending a lot of time with her. He also seemed to prefer spending more time with his daughter over me. Some evenings when we were supposed to play baseball, just the two of us like we used to, he would refuse, saying he wanted to spend time with Catherine. He even stopped coming to my sports events to cheer me on and no longer help me with my homework. At first, I thought this was perhaps just a phase, but then my mom started doing the same. I would watch the three of them laughing and spending time together, often forgetting that I was part of the family as well. It was as if I had become invisible. I guess sometimes as the oldest child, we have all gone through this feeling of being left out. I tried talking to my mom about it, expressing how I felt, but she brushed it off, telling me that it was nonsense and that I was overreacting. Her dismissal hurt more than I let on. I began to feel isolated and lonely in my own home. I started spending more time alone, throwing myself into my studies and sports as an escape. I wanted to make them proud, to remind them that I was still there, still part of the family. But the more I tried, the more distant they seemed to become. It wasn't that I resented my little sister. I loved her dearly, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being pushed aside. For example, that year I had been looking forward to my birthday, hoping it would be a chance for us all to reconnect and spend some quality time together. I had even dropped hints about wanting to go to my favorite restaurant and maybe catching a movie afterwards. The day started off well enough. My mom wished me a happy birthday in the morning, and Van gave me a quick hug before rushing off to work. They promised we'd do something special that evening. I went through the day at school feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. When I got home, the house was filled with the smell of cake, and decorations were up. It looked like they had put effort into making the day special for me. My excitement peaked as the evening approached. However, just as we were about to leave for dinner, Catherine started fussing and crying. Van immediately rushed to her side, trying to calm her down, while my mom followed with concern etched on her face. They spent the next hour trying to soothe her, completely forgetting about the dinner plans. By the time she had settled down, it was too late to go to the restaurant. Instead, they suggested we just order pizza and have a quiet night at home. I tried to hide my disappointment as we sat around the table eating pizza. They were both focused on Catherine, making sure she was happy and entertained. Later that night, I went to bed feeling more alone than ever. The day that was supposed to be about celebrating me ended up revolving around Catherine. It wasn't that they didn't care. They just seemed to forget that I needed attention and care too. I wish I could say that over the years their behavior towards me improved. But unfortunately, it never did. Their focus was always on Catherine, her health, her schooling, her outfits, her friends, and her marks. I was basically just left to raise myself and be on my own. Every milestone in Catherine's life was a big event. They celebrated her first day of school with a huge breakfast, complete with pictures and a special note tucked into her lunchbox. My mom would spend hours helping her with school projects, making sure every detail was perfect. Van was always there to cheer her on at her dance recitals and school plays, front and center, clapping the loudest. In contrast, my achievements often went unnoticed. When I received top marks in my class, my mom barely acknowledged it with a distracted, "Good job," while she was busy cooking something. The one time I scored the winning goal in a soccer game, Van had promised to come, but at the last minute, he stayed home because Catherine had a minor cold. I looked into the stands, expecting to see a familiar, supportive face, but there was no one there for me. Conversations during family dinners always revolved around Catherine. How she did in school, her friends, and her activities. When I tried to share something about my day, I was often interrupted or met with a polite nod before the focus shifted back to my sister. Holidays and birthdays were particularly tough. While Catherine received thoughtful gifts, mine were almost an afterthought. One Christmas, Catherine got the latest, most expensive dollhouse, complete with furniture and dolls, while I received a generic gift card for $50. I thought at first it was a joke, but then my stepdad told me that I was getting too old for them to buy me gifts every year. Despite all this, my sister and I had a good relationship. Catherine looked up to me, and I never showed any resentment towards her. We would spend hours playing together, whether it was building forts out of couch cushions or playing make-believe games in the backyard. We always found ways to have fun. She would come to me with her problems, and I loved being the one she turned to for advice. She would often sit on my bed at night, asking me to tell her stories or help her with her homework. I made sure she knew she could always count on me, even when I felt invisible to our parents. I made sure Catherine never felt that way about me. I wanted to be the big brother she could always rely on. However, the worst thing that happened to me was when I was just about to graduate high school. My mom and stepdad sat me down to talk. They had serious expressions on their faces, and I immediately felt a knot form in my stomach. They went on to inform me that since I was turning 18 soon, they felt that it was time for me to venture out on my own since I was not going to be a child any longer. I looked at them, confused, and asked what they meant. My mom seemed nervous, but my stepdad took the reins and told me firmly that since I was going to college in a few months, him and my mom wanted me to move out permanently so they could finally turn my room into a study room for Catherine. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I asked why they needed me to move out when this was my home too. Did they no longer consider me a part of the family? My mom and stepdad exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. My stepdad then continued, saying that when he turned 18, even he had to do the same, so it wasn't a big deal. He tried to frame it as if it was time for me to learn to be an adult, that it was all part of being a grown man. I felt my heart breaking as I looked at them, hoping that my mom would stand up for me, that she would say something to make me feel like I still belonged. But she stayed silent, her hands wringing in her lap, unable to meet my eyes. The realization hit me hard. All those years of feeling alone and unseen were not just in my head. They truly didn't see me as part of their family. I felt so bad and betrayed, like I was being cast aside now that they didn't have to take care of me since I was turning 18. I then informed them that if they didn't want me, I would move out. But I reminded my mom that she had promised to help me out with college. Before she could respond, Van interrupted and informed me that I had no right to expect my mother to help me, since it was technically her money anyway. He suggested that I should focus on getting into college with a full scholarship on my own. He also went on to lecture me about how not everyone is as privileged as I am, and that I should learn to do things on my own, otherwise I would always be dependent on him and my mom for everything. His words felt like a slap to my face. He was clearly insinuating that I had been leeching off him all this while, and now that he wasn't required to take care of me, he wanted me out of their lives. I guess after having Catherine, he never really loved me anymore and must have only thought of me as an extra baggage in his life. I shook my head, got up, and walked away from them, feeling more alone than ever. That night, I called my grandfather in tears and told him I'd be coming to stay with him starting the next day. He was more than happy to have me, but also curious about what had happened. I poured my heart out to him, sharing everything Van had said and how it made me feel. Grandpa was furious and immediately called my mom, leading to a heated argument. However, to my disappointment, my mom sided with Van, insisting that she had done more than enough for me already. The following day, I asked some friends to help me pack up and move my things to my grandpa's place. Van and my mom seemed surprised by how quickly I was moving out, but they didn't try to stop me either. Catherine wasn't home when I left. I knew if she had been there, I wouldn't have been able to hold back my tears. However, a few hours after I settled in at my grandpa's place, Catherine called me, confused and concerned. She asked why I wasn't in my room and that she had looked for me everywhere. I suggested she ask our parents about it because I didn't want to be the one to break the news to her. When she continued to press for more details, I reluctantly told her about what Van and Mom had said to me and how I had to leave. Catherine was furious and started shouting at me, demanding to know why I would even agree to do such a thing and how they had no right to ask me to move out. I explained that I didn't have a choice in the matter. Her voice cracked as she asked if she was the reason why her dad had kicked me out. I hesitated to answer, knowing the truth would only cause more pain. She must have understood what my silence meant and burst into tears, apologizing profusely. I held back my own emotions and reassured her that she had nothing to do with what happened. I emphasized that I would be okay living with Grandpa and that she shouldn't blame herself. Living with my grandpa brought about a new chapter in my life. Despite the initial upheaval, I worked diligently and secured a full scholarship to my dream university. College life turned out to be an incredible experience for me. I made lasting friendships, explored new passions, and even found love with Janice, my amazing fiance. After graduation, I landed a fulfilling job in the IT field and have only grown better in my career over the years. I have never reached out to Van in all the years since I moved out, and my mom has hardly ever called me. She might have sent me a total of 3 to 4 messages, sometimes on my birthdays, but that's it. The only family members I still talk to are my grandparents and my sister. Unlike our parents, Catherine has never stopped talking to me. She always calls to update me on her life and asks about mine. She was the first one to know when I had a crush on my girlfriend back in college and even encouraged me to ask Janice out. In the previous years, I have driven to her university several times to spend time with her or meet up with her friends and her boyfriend, as she wanted me to get to know them. It's safe to say that we continue to have a healthy relationship as siblings. Just recently, Catherine graduated from college and moved into her own place. She was excited about this new chapter in her life and had called me to talk. We had a long conversation earlier in the day, and I couldn't help but feel proud of her. Later that same evening, while Janice and I were getting ready for bed and relaxing at my place, I received an unexpected call. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was my mom, which was startling as she had never even called me once in all these years. Despite my surprise, I decided to answer, thinking it might be a medical emergency. Initially, the conversation was a bit awkward as my mom tried to act normal and asked how I was doing. I cut straight to the chase and inquired about the reason for her call. There was a moment of hesitation before my mom mentioned Catherine. She asked me if I still talked to my sister and seemed unaware of the closeness between Catherine and me. I asked why she wanted to know. That's when my mom shared the surprising news. Apparently, Catherine had sent a group text to her and Van in the evening, expressing her decision to cut off all contact with them forever. She explained in the message that she had waited for years to finally graduate so she could finally sever ties with them as they were paying for her education during college. Catherine went on to write she felt that their treatment of me, their other child, was completely unacceptable. She expressed her feelings clearly, stating that she didn't want to be associated with people who could mistreat their own family members in such a way. It was clearly an unexpected move by Catherine, since even I had no idea that she wanted to do this. This is why Mom was reaching out to me after all these years. I assured Mom that while Catherine and I were still close, I had no say in Catherine's decision. My mom then started suggesting that maybe I had poisoned my sister's ears about her and my stepdad over the years, and that it wasn't really their fault that I never stayed in touch with them after moving out. I found her statement somewhat amusing, so I reminded her of the circumstances. I mentioned how she watched me move out of Van's house without offering much help. I pointed out that while they had supported my sister financially, I had to earn my degree through a scholarship. My mom argued back that she believed I could take care of myself since I was a guy. This response irritated me, and I pushed her to tell me exactly why she didn't protect me from Van. I questioned why she didn't stand up for me, especially since she was my biological mother and I expected more from her. She hesitated, but eventually revealed that every time she looked at me, I reminded her of my dad's face. She expressed guilt over moving on from him and felt that having me around only brought back memories of the past. Therefore, she didn't intervene when Van wanted me to move out because she believed that not having me around would help her move forward without dwelling on the past. And unfortunately, it had seemed to work for her all this time. I was stunned when I heard her words. It was difficult to believe that my own mother could be so unbelievably cruel. Just because I shared some features with my dad and resembled him, she had pushed me away and didn't even feel guilty watching me move out. I shook my head in disbelief and told my mom that Catherine cutting off contact with them was probably for the best, considering my mom didn't deserve to be a parent to anyone. I further went on to tell her that if Dad was alive, he would be ashamed of her. Hearing this, my mom started calling me selfish and urged me not to encourage my sister in this mad decision, suggesting that I should learn to forgive them for the past. I was so pissed that I chose not to respond and ended the call. Since last night, she has been texting me and trying to get in touch with me. Even Van has called me 3 times, but I have ignored both of them. AITA, if I choose to not stay no contact with them, even though they blame me for Catherine's decision. Update 1. I had a heartfelt conversation with Catherine during which she sheepishly admitted that she had in fact sent that text to them as she wanted nothing to do with our parents anymore. She explained that witnessing what our parents had done to me had deeply affected her, and she found it difficult to forgive or overlook their actions. In response, I reassured Catherine that I harbored no lingering grudge towards our parents and that she was free to do as she pleased. However, she emphasized that her decision to cut them off wasn't solely based on what they did to me, but also stemmed from her own contemplation over the matter for a considerable period of time. It quickly became evident that Catherine had given this decision quite a bit of thought, so I didn't force her to change her mind. As for her mom and Van, I have blocked them and will continue to ignore their existence. This is exactly what they wanted when they kicked me out years ago, so I'm only respecting their wishes. Also, for those who keep pointing out to me that Catherine is technically my half-sister, please stop using that term. I don't like that word, because to me, she was and will always be my sister. Anyway, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy lives and commenting. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.